What's up, guys, and welcome to MMB BBQ, the podcast. Once again, it's MMBBBQ.com. My name is Mikey. Today we actually got to do a cool Skype call with Wayne from Wrens BBQ Podcast, which it's the only barbecue podcast that focuses on if you're into barbecue competitions or you want to start doing barbecue competitions. It's a great way to get some information without really doing too much work. And when I say without doing too much work, he really does a good job at allowing you to listen and learn really, really well. Go to his website. It's Wrens BBQ.tv. It will be in the blog. It will be in the show notes and all that kind of stuff. So just check it out. And this is our conversation. So once again, this is my conversation with Wayne from Wrens BBQ.tv or Wrens BBQ Podcast, Competition Podcast. So hope you guys enjoy, and here it goes. What's up, guys? It's Mikey with MMBBBQ.com. We are talking with Wayne from Wrens BBQ.tv. It's also a podcast. So it's Wrens BBQ Podcast. You can find it on iTunes, and pretty much any podcast version that you use would be, or any method that you use for podcasting will probably work for that. But let's cut to the chase. Let's talk to you, Wayne. You are from New Jersey, which is not exactly known for their barbecue, or known for their barbecue at all, if I'm correct. I believe you are
pretty much.
You are a state of diners and museums, if I am correct.
Mosquitoes too. You can't forget that one. That's the state bird.
You do have some of those up there. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but yeah, no, I mean, there's two barbecue joints up here. One is a Famous Dave's, and the other is a Whole Hog Cafe, which started in Little Rock, Arkansas, I believe, and they got like 14 stores, so now they're technically a chain. But that's it. It's that and whatever I cook. So
that and whatever you cook, which is great. That's all you need. Whatever you cook. Now, are you still using the same cooker that you talk about on your podcast?
Yes. So I actually am looking to literally today. I've been online looking for a new one. So I have a Charbroil Silver Smoker, which is the $85 thing. It's similar to an Oklahoma Joe, I think it might be called, or something like that.
Yep.
It's one of those like 55-gallon barrels that's on its side that also has a little mini barrel attached as an offset. So, and it is horrible. It leaks like a sieve, but it's what I got, so I've learned how to use it.
You know, I totally understand, and that's okay. I started my first barbecue on a Weber kettle. I started cooking with a Weber kettle, and then I started smoking on that same Weber kettle. So it definitely takes a little bit of time and a little bit more finesse to smoke on something like that. I have cooked on one of those offset cookers, and I do like them. I like them a lot. Now, you say that yours kind of leaks a little bit until you kind of fixed it up a little bit. But once you did make all those changes and it stopped leaking, how was holding temperature?
Temp holding has been a lot better now, so I actually can keep it at a constant 250 for probably about an hour to an hour and a half at a time before I have to refuel it. It does eat fuel very quickly. But I can keep a pretty decent maintained temp on it. What I do have problems with is if it spikes, it's sometimes hard to actually just kind of get it to cool down, because you kind of have to open everything up, and that just gives more air to the fire anyway. So if you get a temperature spike, it's a little difficult to figure out, but otherwise, as long as I kind of keep it cool and don't open it a lot, it tends to work really well.
Now, what kind of fuel are we using? Are we using lump charcoal, briquettes, just straight sticks? You doing just, straight?
So I started with lump charcoal, so the wood lump, and this was before I really understood a lot of temperature control. And if you go back to one of the first posts that I did on my blog, it was called How to Use Your Vents. If you look at the pictures, you can see that my grill is completely rusted out. And basically what happened is I didn't know how to control my vents. So I was fully opening everything all the time, and I was using an entire charcoal chimney stack of coals lighting that whole thing up like a full-out grill. And I didn't have a temperature gauge in the grill at the time. So it was just one of those, I didn't understand how hot it was getting. So I had a pork shoulder in. Sorry, up north we call them pork shoulders, pork butt for the rest of the country. So I had a pork butt in, getting ready to do pulled pork. And I had one of those not remote wireless, but it was like a wired thermometer where you stick it in, you have like a 10-inch lead, and you have the digital part outside of the actual cooker. So I had one of those guys in there, and I remember I'm an engineer by trade, so I actually read manuals and learn how to use something appropriately, how they are supposed to be all figured out in instructions.
One of the only.
Yeah, one of the few. Yeah, and I found out, and it's in there, that the actual cord was rated for 700 degrees temperature. It melted when I came out. Didn't know. I went inside for an hour, came back out, and I hear the thing beeping. I'm like, it's only been out for an hour. I need 6. Why is this thing beeping? And then I look, and the cord is dangling on the side. And this is 4 feet away from the fire, which means it got hotter than 700 degrees, more than 4 feet away from my flames. So, yeah, learn how to use your vents, guys. So yeah, I stopped using lump charcoal because specifically it will get hotter faster than your briquettes will, and the briquettes will give you a more even burn. So nowadays, I'm using briquettes, and I will use wood chunks for smoke flavoring. I will eventually move back to wood charcoal now that I understand more and know more. But as of right now, I still have 60 pounds of briquettes because I go buy it like a bulk, like a Sam's, BJ's kind of type of thing. Now, yeah, I have a ton of charcoal still lying around. So,
are you using Kingsford? Or are you using any brand name, or are you using
So that specifically, the stuff that I have right now is Kingsford's competition briquettes. So they do give a pretty decent burn. So they will last for quite some time, which is good. The wood, I've just been using hickory and some other hardwoods that I can get from around the area, like oak and some apple and stuff like that.
Okay.
But
now, what different?
Yeah, I haven't.
Sorry. I've never used the Kingsford briquette. I've used like the regular briquettes, but I've never used competition briquettes. Are they different in size? If somebody picks them up, can you tell the difference once it comes out of the bag, or is it just they pretty much look the same? They just burn a little bit longer.
So I actually really haven't done like a scientific comparison of them, holding them up to each other type of scenario. I think they do look a little bit larger in size. I think they're more dense. So I think whatever like pulp that they mix together and smash into the briquette form, I think just has a little more of a denser form to it. So there's more substance in there, so it just burns longer. I could be wrong. If you have any Kingsford listeners, feel free to send me an email and correct me. But that's from what I can tell. That's what I've gotten out of it. I can use less of them and get a longer burn than I would like if I went and picked up just a normal bag of Kingsford from the grocery store or whatever.
Okay. That totally understand, and it makes life a little bit easier, guys. When you're doing a 6 to 7 or 8 hour cook, having your fuel last longer, A, saves you money, B, makes your life a lot easier because you're no longer refueling every few seconds. You don't have to stoke your fire, especially once your fuel starts running out. You're going to start losing temperature, and then you don't want to put too much in because, like you said, it's hard to control those temperature spikes. If it goes up too high, you're going to start you have to start getting it down, and then your meat's starting to cook unevenly. So definitely look into a good fuel source. That's the only thing I can tell people. And you were saying you were looking at a new cooker. What kind of cookers are you looking at? What are you thinking?
So because of the timing for when my competition, so I'm going to be entering a competition coming in April. So it's April 3rd and 4th. And I don't know when this recording will be coming out, but I think we're talking February 25th right now or something like that.
It is February 25th, yes.
Yeah, so because of the 1 month time frame and having to learn how to cook on it, I'm looking at something probably like a Weber Smoky Mountain, something that is just small that I can pack with me for the competition, and I can have it as an extra grill. So the person that's going to be cooking with me, who's going to be my teammate, he's a coworker of mine, and because I've been doing barbecue now for a few years and always bring it into the office, he's one of the people that actually caught the bug because of me. So he's like, well, what should I get? And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, everyone I've interviewed said you should start with a Weber Smoky Mountain. So he went out and bought a 22-inch. And so
now, are you thinking to get a 22-inch, or are you going to get are you going to get the 26-inch?
I might.
Or the
they have a 26 now?
Is it?
22 is the biggest one that I know of.
Okay,
so
I'm sorry. Maybe it's the 22. I'm thinking of the 22 because
yeah.
they have a 16, an 18, and a 22.
Right. Yeah, so the 22 is like the $400 guy. I was not thinking that. I was thinking maybe the 18 because I already have the offset guy, and even though it leaks, it still is pretty decent. So it's just one of those things where I might just pick that up to bring it along. Because one of the other things that we have is there will be I'll need to make sauce, and I like cooking my sauce fresh. And I'm going to need a source for that, and I'd prefer not to open my offset burner to use that as a direct heat source if I have like a pork shoulder or a brisket on there. So I would want to keep that temperature maintained. So I need a secondary source of heat in order to just cook my sauce. So
absolutely, I totally understand. Have you thought about besides a Weber Smoky Mountain, which guys, that's an awesome grill to start on. It's really nice. It works really, really well. And like you said, a lot of people recommend it. I really thought about getting one before I moved into the Big Green Egg, and it's a great grill. So let us know if you end up picking that up and how it worked out for you, because that's something we really would like to tell our listeners, because you don't have to spend a fortune on these things. I know they can become a fortune. I was looking at a couple different cookers today, and I'm like, oh, this one's $12,000. I want it.
Yeah.
But I'll get
I know
killed.
what you mean. Now, I'm also an extremist kind of person. I don't know if you saw the picture that was going around of that barbecue, the biggest barbecue grill, quote unquote, in the world that was for sale from like $300,000 in Texas.
I believe
where
they
they
did.
literally took a semi truck gas haul carrier and turned that into a giant smoker. So I would do something like that, but bigger.
That's great. Could you afford the fuel cost? That's the biggest question.
Maybe if I find someone that's like deforesting an area, I can ask them for all the spare wood, but
yeah, if you're deforesting an area, you could definitely. I mean, at that point, you're throwing in like full branches. You're not just throwing in some little chunks. Let's talk a little bit about wood. Let's talk about the woods you use. You said you use hickory. What other kind of flavors do you like to put into that?
Mostly fruit type of flavors. So there's a lot of apple in Jersey. I would like some pecan, but I'd have to get that shipped in because it's not really native to the area. And actually, so the guys from Whole Hog Cafe that I mentioned earlier from a restaurant standpoint, I met the owners, and they're kind of like one of those things. It's like, I wouldn't mind being in their shoes like a few years from now. They started the same thing. There was one guy that kind of had a rub and was cooking for parties, and someone said, hey, you should compete. He started competing, and then someone else said, hey, you should sell it. You know, they kind of naturally grew the organic path. And so that's where they're at right now. And so they live, like I said, down in Little Rock. So they get a lot of pecan wood naturally from the area, and they will ship it to their Jersey location from down there. And they'll send, 2 or 3 cords of wood at a time, and they'll use that for their smoking. So, that's the same kind of thing. If I wanted to do pecan, which is a pretty well-used wood, I'd have to get it shipped in. So,
yeah, that's kind of what I have to do in my life. Being in Chicago, there's not exactly a forest that I can cut down or get natural wood from any natural source. So I do get a lot of my wood shipped to me. Currently, I'm on a big orange wood kick. I like using orange wood for my pork, and I think it works really, really well. I got really excited when I saw it, and then I tried it, and then I got even more excited. So,
okay. Does it actually add some kind of a citrusy type of flavor or aftertaste?
A little bit. It's not very prominent, but it's there.
Okay, so it's mild.
It's a very mild wood.
That's good.
But it really does. Especially for my pork, and it goes really well with my pork rub. I make my own pork rub, kind of like most people do. but
right.
it just works really, really well. And I'm really excited about it. And I was able to get a couple bags, and I've been using it. So it's just working really well, and everyone's loving it. Everyone's like, "Whoa, what wood did you use?" Like, they've noticed. So I think that's kind of important.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to try that out.
Yeah, there's a couple of different websites you can get them on. I'll send you some of the links. It's not super expensive, which makes it nice. The brand that I use is Western Woods. I believe it's about $10 a bag, which isn't brutal. And then depending on where you live, obviously shipping costs and all that can sometimes kill you. But the website I ordered it off of, which was firecraft.com, I think it was $5 for shipping, which isn't bad at all.
Oh, okay.
So now you're in a place where it snows.
Yes, and there's snow on the ground right now.
It's been snowing all day today here in Chicago. So my question is, are you a year-round cooker?
I am. Now, I say that with a little bit of hypocrisy. I haven't been on my cooker in probably 3 weeks, but that's more of other things being in the way of cooking, not the temperature. I don't care about that because it's fire and it'll keep you warm. So, but I just, for the past 3 weeks, unfortunately, I haven't been able to get out and cook like I've been wanting to because of other family events and other things like that going on. But it doesn't bother me though. I had cooked in early January. I smoked a pork shoulder and I did ribs a few weeks back. So it doesn't bother me. And this coming weekend, I'm going to be smoking something and starting to practice for that competition. So
now, how do you feel about keeping temperature when it's that cold? Are you going through a lot more fuel? What are some cooking tips for cooking in the winter? We did a little bit of a podcast on that earlier. So I want to talk to some other people that cook in the winter.
Yeah, so I mean, the big thing from it, and this is me pulling out the nerd card at this point, because your smoker is a big metal box, and the way that physics works is when cold air hits it at a moving pace, so you actually have wind coming through, it will pull heat out of the metal faster, because metal is a conductor. So you end up actually dropping overall temperature in your smoker the more windy it is. So it's not just that the temperature's cold, because that you can just kind of increase your fuel source and build your heat up. But the wind is what really kills it. So for anyone that's out there, now I haven't had to worry too much about it because where my smoker is physically, I have a shed that has an awning. And the awning itself actually has almost like a fence around it that's kind of like a privacy fence. So it really blocks the wind really well from where it's at. So I just keep the smoker there, and I haven't had to really worry about kind of doing any wind guarding or anything like that for it. I do have to use a little more fuel than what I normally would, but it hasn't been a significant thing where it's like normally I go through a quarter of a bag and all of a sudden I'm going through 2 bags. Like, it's not something drastic. You just do notice that you are putting more into it. But if you have like a Weber Smoky Mountain or anything in general that, is doing charcoal or wood and that's not a pellet cooker, finding some way to block the wind is going to be your best bet. So there are grill blankets that are out there that are kind of like thermal resistant type of scenario. And as long as you're not going past your 250 to 300 degrees, most thick, heavy kind of cloths like canvas and things like that will not catch fire or burn. So, I mean, you could probably build your own if you really wanted to, but I mean, I always suggest to be safe and go get something. Or you can build stuff. There's plenty of websites, kind of like enclosures almost for their smoker that are basically just plywood boxes that they put around the thing. So that's really it. It's just keeping the wind off your smoker in order to help it with the temp.
Yeah, that's super important, especially for me. Like where my smoker is, it's kind of almost like at the end of an alley, and it's not really an alley; it's just a courtyard. But the wind just howls straight through it. So
you're also in the windy city, so you're kind of screwed.
This is true. This is very true. But for where my smoker is, sometimes it's just I have to put something in front, just right in front of it to block that wind because it stokes the fire way too much. I mean, I could have it at a very minimal opening, and it's just how much wind goes into it. it'll be hard to keep a lower temperature. Now, with cooking with the egg, I've noticed staying at 225, 250 is super easy. Or at least I've made it to the point where I'm able to get it to there fairly with ease, and that cooker just holds its temperature very nicely.
Yeah, and that's also, the egg's ceramic, so that is not as prone to the same problems as what I just described. So, I mean, mine is a completely metal outside housing, so that's going to definitely conduct, whereas ceramic isn't going to do that the same way. So you just have to worry about wind getting into the vents as opposed to the overall thing getting wind. So
exactly, you are completely correct. But when I was smoking on my Weber kettle, those were all the things that I was going through, which wind was hitting it and temperature was going crazy, and it was just very difficult to control just because it was going down so fast. And I'm a year-round cooker. I cook in every temperature, anything I can cook in, I cook in. It doesn't matter whether it's snowing, raining. It doesn't matter to me. I will cook. What's the coldest you've ever cooked in, if you can remember?
Below 30. I know that for sure. I mean, it hasn't actually gone below 0 here probably in the past few years. We've been pushing it. The wind chill, I think, was -7 the other day, so we're close to it. But yeah, like I said, I haven't cooked in the past 3 weeks, and that's the bulk of the storms that we've gotten. So I think in December and January, it was somewhere around 30-something degrees that I was cooking in. So still cold. It's technically freezing.
No, absolutely. My question was, what's your tips with getting the meat in the house? What do you do?
Run? I mean that back shed that I'm talking about is right off the back deck of my house, so it's probably 15 feet away from the door. So it's in general, and we mentioned it earlier, so I don't know if it was during the show or the pre-interview chat. We talked about Aaron Franklin. His videos, if you ever watch any of his Growing or Barbecue with Franklin, I think is the series is called.
Absolutely.
He uses dishcloths basically for everything. And actually, if you ever watch inside of like professional kitchens and stuff like that, they never use oven mitts. So I do that now. So I prescribe to using towels for everything. So if I'm going to bring in something like, a pork butt or a brisket or whatever, and it's done, I will more than likely be putting it in some kind of a pan and just kind of grabbing it into one of those pans with the dish towels, and then use the same dish towels to grab the pan and literally just walk inside. So, there isn't like any kind of secret tip to it or anything. It's just really get it off the fire and then walk, 10 feet. So
absolutely. Now, do you wrap or do you not?
Yes, I wrap everything. Meat, you'll hear this from a lot of people, and the time will change here and there depending upon who you're talking to, but between 3 to 4 hours is usually the actual absorption of meat type. So, a brisket or a pork shoulder or whatever just literally won't take smoke that much longer. Or you're not going to get an enhancement to the flavor if you just keep on going. So if you don't wrap, you do run the risk of starting to dry your meat out. There are people that don't wrap, and they will do things like squirt apple juice or whatever onto the meat and constantly be basting it. Or if you're cooking with a mop, that will help keep moisture in the product. But because I'm cooking over the period of 6 to 12 hours sometimes, I don't want to constantly do that. So after 3 or 4 hours, I'll wrap it in a few layers of foil and then, kind of just let it go from there.
Okay. Now, are you a wet smoker? Do you use a water pan?
So my smoker is not built with one. So if I do, and I've done both with and without, if I use quote unquote a water pan, it is literally a big cast iron like soup pot that I've put water into, and I literally just stick over the flame. But it's not, it more helps regulate my temperature. It's not that it's really producing like a steam bath that is going to keep the meat moist. As opposed to me not having it. So like I said, I've done both. But it's more of, I noticed it helps keep my temperature cooler back when I was cooking back with, the lump charcoal and didn't know what I was doing from a vent perspective.
Awesome. Okay. Well, that's a good tip actually for people who, have never smoked anything. Some people believe that you have to have a water pan. Some people, can go without it. So it's kind of cool that you've done both. So you've seen kind of both methods, I guess you could say.
Yeah, and there's a couple of other sources of information. You can go do a Google search for it, and there's some other barbecue audio sources that are out there where they've actually debated that with a couple of people, and it turns out that unless you are full out boiling water and fully causing heavy amounts of steam, you're not actually putting enough moisture into the air for it to make a difference in your actual meat. So it's more like you're just kind of keeping some moisture in the air, but it's going to be something that the average person isn't going to notice.
That's a very good point. I do use a water pan still, even in my Big Green Egg, and I think it's more of a thought, or it's more just like a comfort pillow for me in a way. I don't need it. It's not a necessity. It's just more, I guess, comfort of thought, being like, oh yeah, the water pan goes in there and I put water in it, and that's it. So
now, one thing that I have seen that I saw Myron Mixon do this on the video, where he will actually add full ingredients like halves of onions and quarters of lemons and other things like that into his water pan, almost like a stew, and that is enough to add some flavor difference. So, you have food that is actually causing some aromatics at that point. And so if you're doing it while you're still adding smoke from wood, you could potentially, like you mentioned, doing the orange wood, if you throw 50 lemons into a water pan type of thing and have that boiling a little bit, you will get some kind of citrus into the air, which could potentially affect the flavor of the meat slightly. So that is something to consider, as if you use it almost like a stew.
Yes, that's very true. And that's something I might actually try. Maybe slicing up some oranges and throwing them in there with it, and see if it maybe brings out the orange wood a little bit more, and see how many people like it. So we were talking in the pre-interview. Obviously, I am a fan of the podcast that you do. My big question is, what made you start your podcast? What made you focus on competition barbecue, and what made you wanna basically share your knowledge with people? Because I feel like there's a lot with competition barbecue it's a little bit secretive. It's once you get your knowledge, not everyone wants to share it until asked. And I feel like some people that want to get into competition barbecue, it's very, very hard for them. It's very hard for them to get a grasp and an understanding, and they don't know which way to go. So I think it's awesome that you're doing a podcast to help these people. My question is, why?
Because I'm nice. Duh. No. So it's actually, I will try to not make this a very, very long answer, but it is a long answer, unfortunately. It comes from two things. I have actually a background with a lot of creative processes. Musically, I do photography. There's just a bunch of things like that. And with photography specifically, it's the same kind of thing where a lot of these, pros that are out there, if you ever follow anything, photographers and stuff like that, will have their own pictures and their own way they do stuff, and they'll never tell you how they actually set that picture up. And it's kind of a mindset of scarcity as opposed to a mindset of abundance. If you think that, if I teach you how to cook a pork shoulder the same way I do, then that means that someone might buy yours instead of mine, or you might win instead of me. When it really, I think that that's the not appropriate way to go about it, because cooking, like any of the other things that I've just mentioned, are really an art, and you have your own personal flair into it. So, even if I gave you my exact rub recipe and said, here, this is how long I cook, a pork shoulder for, and you and I went ahead and sat down and both cooked them at the same time, there's a pretty good chance they aren't going to taste the same. And it's because of what I do differently, kind of as a passion point, compared to what you do differently. And it's not saying either one would be good or bad, or better or worse than each other. They would just be different because we're individual, unique people. So I don't want to hide that information because I'm not scared of it. I think the more people that there are involved, the better off everything is. I mean, if you look at it from a financial standpoint, you get more people buying into competitions. Everybody gets bigger pots, so you got better sponsorship. It helps the economy at that point. And then if you look from a community standpoint, everyone that I've ever talked to on the show basically you're just like, it's one big party and then we just ended up cooking, you know? And so that to me sounds like awesome. That's like food orgy kind of scenario. Everyone just gets together and cook, and, you know, a huge party and drinking and fun and stuff. And why would you not want more people there? You know, that's kind of my thought around it. From the podcasting side, I was listening to, so my 9 to 5 is, I'm actually a computer programmer. So I'm an application developer for a very large company that most people in the country will know. I won't mention them so people don't hate me. But I have been listening for not necessarily a way out, but I always like to learn more things and learn about doing stuff. And I had personally always thought about kind of running my own business. So I fell into a couple of business and entrepreneurship podcasts, one of which was called Smart Passive Income. And the host of that, his name is Pat Flynn. He interviews entrepreneurs and people that have started doing things like blogs and podcasts and other things as an alternate revenue stream to their 9 to 5. And so, you know, it helps them pay for things like vacations and other stuff. And some of them are successful enough that they stop their 9 to 5 and just focus on that side stuff full time. He had a guest on, and the guest's name was John Lee Dumas. And John Lee Dumas hosts a podcast called Entrepreneur on Fire. He also is one of the main advocates for podcasting on the internet. He's had conversations with people like Apple execs and back-end Apple people on how iTunes works and how to get yourself noticed on iTunes. You know, same thing with Stitcher Radio and other things like that. He gives out information on how to do podcasts and webinars and other things along those lines. And I think that that's what really inspired it. Was I initially was going to start with some kind of a video series similar to like the Aaron Franklin type of thing. There was just a lot of how do I get this started, you know, trying to find time to record, all that type of stuff. And, you know, there were a couple of his episodes where he was just talking about getting people started in podcasting. So I joined one of the communities that he has that's called Podcasters Paradise. It's a product he sells, so it's that community is really what kind of built me up, got me the information I needed, and really got me started getting my podcast launched. And I think from start to finish, it took me about 3.5 months to get everything in order. And now that's flying, and that community has been tremendous. I was able to bounce all types of things about them. How do I do my logo? How do I get guests? I sent 3 or 4 guest acquisition emails, I call them, to these guys to help me refine it to what I have today, where I went from getting no responses now to at least getting 60 to 70% response rate, based off of just how the community gave input back to me. So that's what really got the podcast started. And one of their big things that they talked about is basically niching down and niching till it hurts. And so, you know, barbecue was something that I had a passion about. Cooking in general is something that I really love. You know, I don't know if you ever saw it. Did you see the movie Chef with Jon Favreau in it?
Oh, I love that movie. That's one of my new favorites.
Yes, that as soon as I saw that movie, I literally watched it 3 times that day. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, this movie was amazing. And the storyline is great, and just like everything about it, like when you watch from the very first scene where he starts literally butchering a pig the appropriate way it's supposed to be butchered, I was completely enthralled. And I'm like, that's exactly, like, if I could do that, I would totally do that. Like, that would be my day job all day long, is executive chef or something like that. And, you know, that was the thing. I wanted to start doing stuff like that. And then I started focusing on barbecue. And then I looked around. There was, at the time, if you do an iTunes search, you can find 4 or 5 barbecue podcasts. 4 of them are dead. They haven't had episodes in more than 2 years. And even if then, they only had about 5 to 6 episodes apiece, and that was kind of it. And there was only one that's been kind of the long-standing champion. It's been around for 8 years. It's a 2-hour show. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just not my format. And it covers everything. You know, yours does the same kind of thing. You cover all over the place, whereas I personally wanted to get into competition barbecue and couldn't find information about it. So I was like, how about I actually go right to the source, ask the pit masters, how do they get started? And then instead of just keeping that information selfishly for myself, record those things and hand that back out to everybody. And that's really kind of where the idea festered and came together. Yeah,
that was a perfect explanation, especially if you guys are listening to his show or you're fans of his show, you can totally see how that comes through. I did a simple search in the podcast app that I use, and I was just looking for barbecue apps or barbecue podcasts, and nothing was coming up. Besides, there is one show, like you were saying, it's about 2 hours long. That came up. I listened to that show, and then I was like, okay, well, what else is there? I want more. What else is there? I've listened to a bunch of the old ones. Some of the podcasts that have been dead, I listened to all those, and then I was like, okay, well, I want something different. I feel like a lot of the barbecue podcasts are kind of the same. They talk about the same stuff. They go over the same stuff, and it's okay, cool. That's great. But what else is there? Let's talk more. And when I started listening to your podcast where it was focused on competition barbecue, and that's something that I'm slowly starting to get into and slowly starting to get into myself, into wanting to do, I was like, well, this is a good place to start learning. Why not? Why not listen to this podcast and learn as much as I possibly can before I go out and do my first cook? And it has helped me tremendously. So thank you as a listener, and thanks for being on the show too, for us, and letting our fan base know about you and vice versa. It's just great. I feel like barbecue's a community, like you said, and if we're not all giving back to each other, then we're kind of hurting each other. You know what I mean? You can either be competition or you can be a friend. And I feel like most people I feel like I want more people to be friends with me than competition. There's a lot of people out there, and everyone's looking for more information. That's how I feel. I don't know if I'm wrong, but Wayne's doing a killer job at it. It's a great show. So if you guys haven't subscribed, make sure you guys go and subscribe to that show. He has been talking about becoming a judge on the show. Now he has done that, so we want to congratulate him on becoming a KCBS judge, so he can actually go and judge competitions. He can go and score people, and now he knows what judges look for. Now, do you feel like that's going to help you out in your first competition cook?
Tremendously, and that's exactly one of the reasons why I did it. So my third guest was Malcolm and Waylon Reed from Killer Hogs Barbecue. And they also have a secondary site called howtobarbecueright.com. I highly recommend that. That was when I was starting this podcast and I started doing Google searches for competition barbecue. Their How to Start in Competition Barbecue blog post was literally the only piece of information I could find. So, and they give a lot of good information, but that's pretty much it. It's whatever they wrote in that sentence and, or in those few paragraphs, and there's nothing else that you can really grab. Now, they have a bunch of YouTube videos that help and everything along those lines, but, that really is what kind of inspired it, was talking to those guys of how to go through with it. And while I'm in the middle of their interview, I asked them, I'm like, what would you guys recommend as one of the first things I do? And they're like, you should really go think about becoming a judge because of that exact reason. What you'll hear a lot as you talk to people that are involved in the barbecue world, especially for the people in competition, there's the type of food that you would cook if you were running a restaurant or throwing a party, and then there's the type of food that you would cook if you were going to a competition. Usually nowhere near the same. And at first I was really boggled by that because, like, for myself, I don't know if you've seen the Barbecue Pit Boys, who's one of the other YouTube video barbecue places that are gives you information and stuff. One of their, I don't know if it was Barbecue Pit Boys. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head because this was a few years back. So it was either them. If not, I'll give them the plug anyway. There was somebody that was cooking, a pork butt, making pulled pork. And if you think about it, so if you got a 14-pound pork shoulder or whatever, 7-pound, doesn't matter. You're rubbing the whole outside of that. The outside of the meat is maybe 5% of the meat. So when you pull that, literally 95% of your product doesn't have your flavoring on it. It's the meat flavor, and that's it. So what they recommended doing was, if you have rub and you rub the whole thing, you cook it down, 6 to 12 hours, whatever, you shred it, pour some of your rub back on it while it's shredded, and then mix that back in. All of a sudden, everything has that flavor kick, and it's fresh. And it's, it's one of those like tongue kickers where you're like, wow, like that's extremely flavorful. And that's what I was giving to people that I was taking to parties and other things like that. And everyone's like, oh my God, you should go into the competitions. This meat is so good, et cetera, et cetera. And then I talk to these guys and they're like, go become a judge first and find out what they're looking for. And then they explain that to you, where they're like, you're really looking for, you want to taste the meat out of this. You don't want to get overwhelmed with so much flavor. And then you're like, oh, the people that I cook for from a party wise think that it tastes good, but they're not judges. So from a judging standpoint, they have no idea what they're actually talking about. So that's what you end up with is you'll have all these people that kind of add all this flavor in, and then you go to the cooking competition, and then you realize you want things to kind of be in this manner, and you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And then also other things, the type of texture of how things are, and, becoming a competition judge really, I think, exposed you to how KCBS would like things to be presented, how they want things to look aesthetically, where their standards are for a lot of things. And I think, some of those people will have definitely been through that process. So I don't know if it necessarily gives me an upper hand. I think it does give me not been exposed to what the judges are looking for. So someone coming in as a first time competition and just blindly going in and cooking stuff, you'll hear about ribs a lot, where people will, you go to like, TGI Fridays or somewhere like that, and it's like, oh, the meat just falls right off the bone, and you peel the whole thing off the bone. Well, that's actually negative marks on a KCBS. You want to be able to bite the meat, get a little bit of a tug and a pull. Yes, you do want the meat to come cleanly off the bone, but only where you're biting, not the entire rib as like a slurp type of thing and pull it off. So little nuances like that. Like if you weren't aware of that and you thought that overcooked ribs, which is really what that is, it's just cooked too much, were what you wanted to do, you actually would not do well inside of a competition coming in with that kind of a thought process. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Most people don't understand that a fall off the bone rib is actually overcooked. They think, oh, well, that's the best taste. It's so juicy. It falls off the bone. It's just perfect. And if you bring that to a competition, you're not going to score well. And I didn't actually think about the pork shoulder. I didn't think about that flavor being too much. That's an interesting thing that you bring up, that if you add a little too much rub into it, especially after you pull it and put that in the box, it's going to be a little bit too much for the judges. They want to taste that pork.
Yeah, and it's going to really depend on where you're at in the country. So I met a couple of people that had come from further south, so like Virginia area and North Carolina, South Carolina area, and one of the things that one of the guys there was saying was, he likes to buy Wagyu beef, which is, for anyone that doesn't know what that is, it's really high quality meat, very, very expensive. So to put it in perspective, if you went to go to the normal regular store and buy regular, prime or choice brisket, it would cost you between $60 to $70. A Wagyu brisket will cost you $200 to $300. So it's astronomically more expensive.
Yes,
he went to. Yeah, I don't remember where he said he went. He was somewhere down south, and he said he went and bought Wagyu beef, and not knowing the area that he lived in, most people from that area that are going to be judging are people that usually live in the area where the event is. Walmart type of beef is what they get down there. So he brings, you bring filet mignon to somebody that's used to just kind of eating, burnt egg kind of things, and they don't know what to really make of it. And so he ended up getting a really low score in brisket because most people didn't know what to make of the flavor of the Wagyu because they haven't had it previously. So they weren't used to it, even though it was technically a higher quality meat. And vice versa, he's gone to some places where they're used to eating Wagyu and he buys choice trying to save a buck type of scenario, and he gets marked down because of that, and you'll get in the comment cards, oh, use a better quality meat next time. So, I mean, it's really... depends on where you are in the country, depends on what kind of town you're in. It's all over the place because it's really the culture of where you're currently competing at, which is going to influence what how they actually end up judging your food.
Yeah, you bring up a great point on that. If you're used to eating a choice cut of meat, you bring in Wagyu and they're going to be like, oh my God, what is this? I don't know if I like it. It tastes a little different. Maybe, did the pitmaster mess up? Did they change something? Did they inject? Did they do this? So yeah, big part of it is remember who you're cooking for, what part of the country you're in, which brings me up to one of my other questions for you. What is your favorite type of barbecue? What part of the country do you like barbecue from the most?
So I'm on a secret mission to start a New Jersey style of barbecue. I don't necessarily know what that's going to end up like, but I'm all over the board, to be honest with you. I like dry rubbed ribs, but I like sweet and sugary barbecue sauce. But every once in a while, I love a vinegar and tang, and on the same kind of thing. So it's really my mood. I don't really prescribe to a specific flavor and say, oh, I have to have Memphis or I have to have Kansas City or blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter that much to me. I've done my briskets like they do in Texas with just salt and pepper, but then I've also done them, how I like to do them. Mix has 16 different flavors in them. Some of which are, Indian spices. Some of them are, Italian seasonings and things like that. And, for someone that's not used to having oregano on brisket, they're not going to know what to make of it necessarily, but I like it. So, it's all over the place for me. I just enjoy flavor of all types. So, I don't prescribe to a specific one. Now, my barbecue sauce that I happen to sell is more of a Memphis style, I believe. Which one's the sweet one? Is that Memphis or Kansas City? I should know this. This is bad.
I believe it's Memphis. You just stumped me on that one. I believe it's Memphis, though. And if we're wrong, email both of us and tell us that we're wrong.
Yeah, and we're going to get smacked on the wrist for not knowing that off the top of our heads. And I actually put the ingredients on my blog for this, except for the rub. I haven't given the ingredients out to this. But basically, I use agave, brown sugar, tomato paste, apple cider vinegar, and then, some of my rub. And that's it. Those are the seasonings that go into my barbecue sauce. So it's a lot of agave and a lot of brown sugar. So theoretically, it's not healthy, but it tastes really damn good. So I don't care.
Most things that taste good aren't exactly healthy. Bacon, for instance. I believe bacon's healthy, but my doctor keeps telling me it's not.
See, you need to prescribe to Dr. Atkins, and then he will say yes.
Exactly. Maybe I'm seeing the wrong doctor. I don't know. But, yeah, now when you go into competition, you're going to be going into your first competition. Are you going to be using your own rub, or are you going to use a store-bought rub? Are you going to use, somebody else's rub? Are you going to use a commercial rub?
No, I'm going to use mine. So one of the things that I actually am going to try, and that's what I'm practicing this weekend. I had Dave Bosca from Butcher Barbecue on one of my episodes, and he is really big on injecting everything. And I have literally never injected any of my meat before. So I've been able to keep moistness in my meat without that. But it's not just about moistness. There's also moistness as well as flavor and some other things like that. So I went ahead and bought an injector as well as some of his pork injection. And I am going to cook a pork butt. I have to say pork butt. There's so many people that yell at me for that. So I'm going to cook the pork butt and inject. Yeah, so I'm going to inject this next coming one to see how I like the flavor difference. And then that will determine whether or not I inject or not inject at my competition. But they will always get my rub, no matter what. So
you're hoping it does well. Awesome.
Yeah, now what I'll probably do is I probably won't add it back in after I've pulled it. So I will probably just keep it on the outside. So that way the bark pieces will have the rub flavor and the rest will just be the flavor of the pork. So I will probably change that technique up, but I'm not going to change my flavor profile. So
okay, that's interesting. We look forward to seeing how you do with it. Now, are you fat cap up or fat cap down for your pork?
I let the fat melt onto the meat.
I'm a firm believer. I kind of do fat cap up too. I feel like it can't melt up, and I know some people like to go fat cap down because they say it protects the meat, but I feel like it's a big enough cut of meat that it doesn't need that much protection, especially if you're keeping your temperature at 225, 250. Maybe if you're cooking hot and fast, it might maybe do fat cap down, but if you're going nice, low, and slow, I don't think you're going to need too much protection from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would probably be okay if you were also cooking on like a smoker like yours, so like a Big Green Egg or a Weber Smoky Mountain, where even though it's indirect, you are right underneath the heat. So it's more like a heat deflection because it's a water pan as opposed to an actual removed heat source. So mine is literally a good 1.5 to 2 feet away from any of the heat source. So even if I were to flip it up or down, it doesn't matter because the heat's actually coming from the left-hand side of the meat. So unless I literally stand it on its side, that's the only way that the fat cap would quote unquote protect the meat. But I've never had a problem with that. So.
Well, that's a good thing. Not having a problem with cooking is always a good thing. So we're kind of finishing up here. Here's one of our final questions: barbecue tips for people that are just getting into it. So I know you give some on your show, but some barbecue tips from you. What would you recommend to somebody who wants to start barbecuing?
There's a lot that are flying through my head, so I'm trying to think of the quick and easier ones. What I would really say is, for whatever piece of equipment you're using, so if you go out and get like a Weber kettle grill type of $50 thing from the store, learn how to use that specific piece of equipment. Understand vents and airflow. It's not something that you ever learn from your parents teaching you how to cook type of scenario. Like my dad taught me how to use my grill, but his understanding was grilling, literally direct heat, 400 to 500 degrees, having the meat right above the meat. Right above the heat and cooking like a steak kind of scenario. What you normally see like a TV backyard cookout. He never knew anything about indirect heat and smoking and things like that. So vent control was never really important. So it wasn't anything that was handed down to me. I had to figure that out through trial and error. There are plenty of videos online that will help you with that, as well as my own blog posts talk about it, and anybody else in the barbecue world that has done any kind of smoking will tell about that. You really need to learn temperature control. And then from there, think about the barbecue like an oven. If you're going to cook something in your oven for baking reasons, you put it at 325 for 2 hours and you leave it there. Do the same thing with a barbecue. You just happen to be using fire instead of propane gas or an electrical heat coil. It's literally an outside oven is the way to think about it. So take a piece of meat, do a turkey, do a chicken. Start with something small. Chicken is cheap. You can literally buy an entire chicken, depending upon where you are in the country, between $5 and $9. So there's no reason to not splurge on an entire freaking chicken and try it for 3 or 4 hours. Put it at 250, 275 for 3 hours and just let it sit out there. And, just learn how to control your fire and, play with it. If you burn it, you get to eat your mistakes or throw it out.
Yeah, pizza's always an easy order.
Yep. Pizza, Chinese, whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. It's always just a phone call away. So if you mess it up, it's not a big deal. Now, do you like just cooking on an open flame? Would you ever go to a pellet cooker or a gas cooker? Would you ever go to any of those?
So gas is a 4-letter word for me. But after having some discussions and seeing several videos with people that I respected in the industry, I would not be adverse to doing a pellet cooker. So I have talked to some people where they're like, nah, pellets are evil type of thing. I never thought they were bad. I just never understood what it was. And, for people that don't know, and if they've heard the term pellet cooker, when we talk about smoking with charcoal and wood, you're literally lighting a piece of charcoal on fire and then you're putting a piece of wood on top of it, and the wood is singeing, being singed and causing smoke to go into the air, and that's kind of the process you get. And then all of that generates heat, and that heat is what's cooking your food. For a pellet smoker, it's pretty much the same thing, except the pellets are literally compressed pieces of wood that haven't been burnt yet. So it's like, if you want to think of it that way, because that's all it is. Charcoal is like just shredded wood pulp that has been burnt to actually be charred, and then you just burn it even more when you make it a heat source. So pellets are just that. They're the pre-burned version of briquettes, essentially, and then they have a controlled burning source. Some people will call it quote-unquote cheating because they used electronic measuring thermometers and things like that, so you can tell a cooker and say, I would like you to cook for 8 hours at 250 degrees. Here's 50 pounds of pellets, go. And so there's people that think that you are, quote unquote, not cooking because you're not watching it. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of a mystique thing, whether or not you think you're badass because you're looking at your fire as opposed to just letting a computer do it. Like I said, I'm in computer development, so, automation is kind of the future, so all hail our robot overlords. So if they're cooking our barbecue for us, why not?
Now, would you ever go to an electric smoker? What is your feel on that?
Maybe. I mean, for the ones that I've ever looked at as a potential purchase, one was electric and one was flame. I mean, they're both pellet, so, at that point, you're still basically burning the same wood, regardless of if it's fire or electricity. The only reason that I'm adverse to gas is propane, and I've at least noticed this, my palate is at least sensitive to notice this. Some people will say that it's BS, but I do notice the flavor difference in the meat when you're using propane, at least for myself. And like I said, when my dad was first teaching me how to light fires, it was soak the briquettes in lighter fluid and then light all of that on fire. There was no such thing as a charcoal chimney or anything like that. So, I used to get that criticism from my wife. She'd be like, "Why is it that your steaks taste like gasoline?" It's like, well, because I soaked the briquettes in lighter fluid. How else are you supposed to do it? So then I learned about a charcoal chimney.
I basically lit it with gasoline.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like I cooked it over gasoline. That's what you get. So, and I mean, really think about that. I mean, yes, burning anything, you're causing carcinogens, blah, blah, blah. We'll leave that science out of it. But when you're burning a chemical that's separate from something natural, you're adding foreign things into your food that could potentially change your flavor or do other things. And so that's kind of my aversion to gas. So, take that for what it is. People love me, hate me, I don't care. I'll continue to cook with your normal charcoal and wood sources, but I'm not adverse to pellets, and I wouldn't mind in a fast, Cook Shack's Fast Eddie, the FC 100 or whatever. It's like the size of a fridge.
Yep.
If I ever got into catering, or anything along those lines, I wouldn't mind having one of those because it would make that a lot easier to put 5 briskets in there and just say 18 hours go. So
totally agree with you on that. And that's when you start looking at catering. Catering is a little bit different than backyard cooking. I don't recommend anyone goes and buys a huge Cook Shack or a big Fast Eddie for your backyard cook.
Yeah, that's $4,000. If you think I'm going to just go pick one of these up. It's like, no.
Slightly an overkill. It's definitely an overkill if you're just cooking in the backyard. So,
just slightly.
And like you said, they are about $4,000 to $5,000, and that's just outrageous sometimes.
Yep.
For most people to comprehend on. I mean, I spent about $2,000 on my big green egg, and some people think I'm crazy, and I feel like it was a great investment. It holds temperature really nicely. I like the ceramic cooker. I am a really, really big fan of it. And there's kind of a weird almost community in the barbecue community of people that cook on big green eggs. We've kind of...
well, Dr. Barbecue himself, Ray Lampy, cooks on... It works for the company, actually.
So does Mo Quezon. And those are two guys that I definitely look up to. Definitely some great barbecue cooks. I believe that, if I'm not wrong, didn't Dr. Barbecue just put out a new online cooking class?
He did. And actually I signed up for it and took it. It is, I think, $24, I believe. That might be one of the affiliate links. I'm not sure. I can send you a link to it or not, but, it's a bunch of videos where he covers a bunch of things like, how to make a rub, how to make a sauce, how to trim a brisket, how to trim, the fat off of a pork shoulder, type of stuff like that. It is a pretty interesting class. If you don't have any exposure to barbecue, it's definitely worthwhile. I personally, even though I haven't been in a competition yet, I have been learning a lot of information, so I didn't really learn too much new from it. But one of the advantages to it is there is a kind of always revolving on the right-hand side of the screen where people can ask questions, and he does participate in that. So you could actually get advice directly from him, which is one of those things that might be worth the money, definitely, for someone that's getting into it and starting to learn. I definitely recommend it for somebody that is still trying to look and find information, because that way you're not hunting all over YouTube and Google for a bunch of stuff. This centralizes it and allows you to do things like bookmark it and have that conversation with a small community of the other students. So it is definitely worthwhile to check out.
That's interesting. I just heard of it, and I was going to check it out. I'm glad I got some feedback from you. I didn't know exactly how much it was, and I wasn't sure exactly how much I might get from it. So, and I didn't know how much he tells you, kind of in the advertisement. Since they're always going to kind of lead you almost to believe that there's more than there might be. Not saying that.
Yeah, no, he does fully cover everything. So I mean, he starts from picking a meat out, trimming it up, doing the rubbing, and then he there's a couple of scenes where he's in his backyard. He has 2 big green eggs, a normal Weber kettle grill, and the cook shack. So he has all the above. He has the charcoal guys, all of them, and he covers it. And he even covers meats that aren't, it's not competition focused, it's just cooking focused. So he covers like how to cook a turkey, like one of the $75 ones that you can get at Target. He smokes ribs inside of his big green egg. He does a brisket and a pork shoulder inside of the cook shack, the Fast Eddie. So he does the different meats across the different ones, shows you how to cut them and slice them, talks about how to cut against the grain. So he does show you a lot of good information. So he doesn't really withhold a lot in there. The videos are short, though. I mean, they're like 20, 30-minute videos. So, I mean, it's just kind of like, here's all of the information, and then if you have anything else, you just basically ask questions. So,
okay, so it's a quick step-by-step kind of, here you go, that's it, there we go, we're done.
Yeah, like he teaches like what he calls like a basic rub, which is like salt, pepper, paprika, and like garlic or something like that. So it's like a very basic. He talks about how to mix it appropriately, shows you how to rub the meat down. So talks about things like that. But he doesn't explore like flavor profiles, and doesn't say like, if you add oregano instead of this, or if you add tarragon instead of something else. Like, he doesn't cover anything like that. So it's not a cooking class in that type of a sense, but it's like, here's how to make a rub. Here's how to make a basic barbecue sauce. Here's how to do a basic cook. And it's a good thing to get started. And, it's one of those things that we said earlier in the show, if you want to be it, you got to do it. So, you get the quick and easy, learn how to make a rub, and then you just start from there and start playing and experimenting. Yeah,
exactly. Start experimenting. And, guys, what's the worst that can happen? You're going to go buy a pork shoulder, you're going to make it, and then you're going to eat it. And then you're going to say, oh, well, maybe it didn't turn out the way. You have to eat no matter what. That's the way I view it, is I have to eat, and I rather make my food on an open grill or on a grill than anywhere else. So all of my mistakes are still edible. So,
Yep.
It's the best mistake you can make. You're not really losing money on it. And if anyone that gets into barbecue, guys, this is a passion thing. Everyone will tell you nobody does competition barbecue for the money unless you're Myron Mixon, and then that's a whole nother story. Or if you're like Johnny Trigg, somebody that's been in the industry forever. So if you're just getting into it, you're gonna have to put some money into it, and that's okay, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I know full well going into this competition that unless I win somehow remarkably as like being my first competition, which does happen, but not that often, I look as it going into it financially as a loss, which isn't a big deal. I just expect, okay, it's going to cost me a bunch of money to cook this weekend, but I think the experience is going to be great. It's going to be fun. I plan on getting a couple of interviews while I'm out there, since I do have a barbecue podcast. So, I'm going to see if I can squeeze a couple of episodes out of people while we're waiting. But, yeah, I mean, that's what I plan on getting out of it. So,
you can't go wrong with that. Squeeze a couple. Hey, let me talk to you for a minute. I got a barbecue podcast. Why not? And that's kind of what I'm looking at too with the competitions I'll be doing. I'll be bringing a little bit of my setup, and we'll talk a little bit barbecue. You're there to cook barbecue, might as well talk some of it. So,
yep.
so much for coming on the show. We covered a lot of great stuff, guys. Once BBQ.TV. You can also go on iTunes and check his show out, which is, if you type in BBQ, honestly, it'll come up. It'll be the second show that comes up. So if you can't remember Wrens, it's literally type in BBQ and it's there. That's how I found it. So super simple. He's doing a great job. Go take a listen to his show. Download all the older episodes and start listening from the beginning. You can skip his intro, which just basically tells you what the podcast is about. But from there, all the other ones are awesome. And I'm not saying the intro was bad. Once you already know who you are.
If you've listened to this, then you kind of already know. So.
Exactly. So just start listening to the meat and potatoes of it, and you'll learn some good stuff. You really will. I was actually quite happy when I started listening to it, and then I was like, when I look for podcasts, I kind of listen to one, and then I decide whether or not I want to subscribe. And I downloaded his intro and then his second podcast. And I listened to the intro and I go, well, that's interesting. Let's see what it sounds like. Listen to the first one. Halfway through it, I believe I stopped it and went and subscribed and then went back and listened to the rest of it. So
okay, wow.
It was definitely a halfway through it. I was like, you know what? This is something I want to listen to. Let's subscribe and let the other one start downloading while I'm finishing this one, so then I don't have to wait. So me waiting to every Friday to have to wait for your podcast to come out is kind of like pulling teeth. I'm one of those people that I like how Netflix puts out Orange is the New Black all at once and I can binge watch it.
Right.
So
no, I know the feeling. I don't know if you'll notice this yet or not, because I don't know how many episodes you already have kind of pre-recorded. When you don't have a name in the industry, like I didn't, I still kind of don't, but I mean, more people do know who I am now. But coming out of nowhere and just saying like, hey, be on my podcast, a lot of people are like, who's this guy? And so they just don't respond. So, now that I've been talking to more and more people and all of these guys know each other, it definitely helps. And I think going to the competitions is what's going to change it. So, if I go to a competition that has 60 or 50 people there, I only need 30 or 40 minutes to talk to somebody. So, I mean, I could probably crank out a good 10 to 15 episodes in a day. And, once I get to the point to where I have more than 6 months of lead time out, then I might step up my schedule and start doing 2 a week, 3 a week kind of thing. So,
well,
it'll happen eventually.
like I said, I love your podcast. It's a great show. So for all of our listeners, you guys better go subscribe to his show too. Don't leave us, but go make it a community. And
but yeah, there's room for everybody.
Absolutely, Wayne. Thank you so much. Let us know how that cook goes. How that cook even this weekend goes. We'd love to see some pictures, and you got to get on Instagram, bud. You really do. We were talking about that in the pre-interview. He's not on Instagram yet, but he's gonna be joining. So once we get his IG link or username, we will shoot it out to all of you guys, and you guys can go follow him and see his awesome barbecue photos, and go check out his website. Also, you do have a Twitter, correct?
Yes, so I'll give you all of the social media and all that fun stuff. So Twitter is at Wrens BBQ, WRENS BBQ. Facebook, same thing. So facebook.com/Wrens BBQ. RwrensBBQ.TV. And my Instagram is Wrens BBQ. Hold on. I'm going to post a picture of me talking to you on Skype, and that will be the very first Wrens BBQ Instagram picture, so that way you can't complain about it, because I have it.
Woo! That's awesome.
So there you go. Hold on. Let's do Facebook. Let's do Twitter. Oh, I gotta sign up. Hold on. Well, I'll do it anyway by the time I'm done with this. So no, I do have it. Like I said, I just haven't used it. There's the difference. So I'm going to be doing that. And actually, also on YouTube. So Wrens BBQ is on there. I do have 2 or 3 small videos. And I plan on stepping all of that up. So I'm going to do recipes on the blog. The podcast is going to be for talking to competition barbecue people and help give information for getting out. And then I'm going to start doing videos around tutorials of cooking and things that might actually go beyond the scope of barbecue, because I do love cooking in general. So, I think I'm going to kind of hit all of the aspects of social media, but for different purposes. So I plan on taking over the whole world that way. So,
well, Wayne's gonna be your cook host for the next 50 years of your life. So get used to him and get used to his voice. He sounds like he's got a plan, which sounds great. Like I said, once again, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll wrap up
definitely.
here.
Thanks for having me.
And guys, go listen to his show. Listen to our comments from us. Now, what's your email if they do want to shoot you an email? I know you can find it on the site, or you can go on the Facebook. You can find it, but just
that is also Wren, WREN at wrensbbq.tv.
Perfect. So if we said anything to offend anybody, feel free to email either one of us. We are manmeetsbbq@gmail.com. So it's manmeetsbbq@gmail.com. You can yell at us about our not remembering the sauce, whether it's Memphis or Kansas City. So if we mess anything up, let us know. But other than that, thank you so much. It's been a great show.
All right, great. Thank you.
So that was our interview with Wayne from Wrens BBQ TV and Wrens BBQ Podcast, the only podcast that is geared towards competition barbecue. Like he said, he's going to be doing some cool things on his YouTube channel. He's going to be doing some awesome stuff on his blog. So make sure you check that guy out. He's up there in New Jersey, so we'll find out if he can make that New Jersey style barbecue or not. Hopefully he can make that stick. I know that we're trying to make some Chicago style barbecue, and I think we're not us personally are doing a good job, but there's a lot of people cooking barbecue up here. So hopefully Chicago will eventually be known for their barbecue. We're known for some other stuff, mostly corruption, but shit, who cares? Like I said, thank you so much, guys. Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you can go over to iTunes and give us a rating, that would be awesome. Let us know what you think. Any feedback is good feedback for me. If you hate us, let us know. Send us an email. It's manmeetsbbq@gmail.com. That's MANMEATSBBQ@gmail.com. Once again, guys, thank you so much. I believe this is episode number 6 of our podcast. So hopefully if you guys are listening and you guys enjoy it, thank you so much. We really are trying to do something cool, and we're trying to make these podcasts not like any other barbecue podcast. So once again, thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you guys soon. Have a great weekend, and enjoy smoking.